Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Powerhouse Podcast. I'm your host, Candy Barone, and let me tell you, we have an incredible show for you today. I am super excited as one of my mentors and just all-around amazing people has come into the ring to join us today, and that is Mr. GP Walsh. Welcome, GP. It's so great to have you.
Oh, this is so much fun. You're so much fun. This is going to be great.
Well, thank you. And as you all know, this is our show to have a bigger conversation around redefining leadership, knowing that leadership is a choice. Leadership is all about how you choose to show up, how you choose to serve, and how you choose to take responsibility in that space. So we're going to get into some good conversation. But before I do that, let me tell you a little bit about this powerhouse who is joining me today. GP Walsh is a man of extraordinary talent. He is a speaker, author, spiritual teacher, energy healer, workshop leader, master coach, master meditation teacher, and a recognized EFT expert. He has been coaching and healing for over 30 years and has touched thousands of people with his irreverent humor, his bold assertions, and his contradictions of conventional wisdom in his unwielding compassion. He is an incredibly compassionate human being. And just a blast, let me tell you. He is nicknamed the Irreverent Sage and has been called a prophet, a wise man, a sage, a rebel, a misfit, a spiritual misfit, a troublemaker, and a few things that will leave to your imagination. With a rare honesty, a biting wit, a timing of a comedian, and insights that can make your head spin, GP has the unique ability to take the most arcane, ambiguous, and impenetrable life teachings and bring them into language that anyone can understand. Just truly powerful what this man can do. He is an expert on spirituality, energy healing, men's and women's issues, meditation, law of attraction, and so much more. The other thing I want to note is that GP does have a radio show, Conversations with G, that has over 25,000 listeners. And so it is, without further ado, my esteemed honor and privilege to have this amazing man join us for some really just powerful conversation today.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Candy. That's boy.
That's a lot.
I got a lot to live up here to.
Well, and it's interesting because you got a lot going on. And so how does someone with the talents that you have and bringing all those things together, how do you manage that and still put yourself first in the equation? Because you got a lot of ways that you serve and help people.
That has been an art form that I've had to develop over many years, and it's an ongoing work in progress, right? Because I'm just very, very fortunate to, over a long period of time, gotten to the point where most of what I do is what I love to do. Mm-hmm. And I minimize the stuff that I don't love to do, but has to get done, right? And I also minimize the stuff that I just really suck at, which is like an important thing as well. I mean, there's a certain thing you can't do. And you make it a priority. I mean, it's kind of self-leadership. I love the theme of the show being leader. It's self-leadership, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, when I started working for myself, which was 1984, I went to, I started, became self-employed, started just doing my own thing. I was the world's worst boss. I mean, I was horrible. I mean, I just had no life at all. Everything was devoted to it. And little by little, I began to realize that I'm killing myself. I'm not having fun. And I wasn't making any money. So it's like, wait a minute. Why don't I just go work somewhere where I'm clearly defined? And right, but eventually, I realized I was not only the world's worst boss, I was also the world's worst employee. that I definitely had to be on my own, and so I began to, you just begin to make things priorities. And when you make it priorities, one thing you think about, it's another thing to actually do it, because the priorities come down to the decisions and choices you make moment by moment. What you value, if you really value it, right? It influences everything, every decision you make. It's a beautiful priority when you know what your values are. It's like you look at two things that have to be done, and you go, well, this is the one that has to get done. This is the one that's aligned. This one isn't. So getting that inner clarity about what matters to you, right? And how you want to live your life, and is like absolutely essential. Without that, you will live someone else's agenda, period. End of story. Because there's 100 people lined up who just, whoa, they just want to grab your time and put it, and make you a bit player in their story.
Yeah. Well, and that's so profound, as we talk about, it really comes down to those priorities. And I think I love the fact that, when you talked about you weren't happy, you weren't doing these things, you weren't making money, and people don't realize that all of those are connected. I think people think they've got to be miserable to make money, and actually it's the other way around, right? And but I'm curious, because while you're walking that talk now, you do a very powerful and purposeful job of setting that priority and making sure that you're stepping up in the right place. And, to use your words, you weren't the best employee or employee. How do you start to make that shift? Because while people may get that and understand that on, somewhat of an intellectual level, and they start to say, yeah, and how do I actually make that a reality in my life? And so as you were going through some of that transition, as you were going through some of those changes, what was it, or what things did you do that actually started to help you focus on getting that clarity around those priorities? Because I would imagine it wasn't just aha, now I'm super clear. And if it was, God bless you.
Yeah. If it is for anybody, I want to talk to them.
Right.
Yeah. No, and it really is, what you touched on there, to me, is the heart and soul of pretty much everything I do. Is how do you go about doing it? How do you actually go about it? We all have great intentions, and they last about a minute, right? We have to come to understand it, and this is the path. Even though I had these major shifts in perception and in spiritual experiences when I was quite young, it took decades to be able to implement it to a level where it could be lived consistently. And the key is understanding that while you may decide that your priority or your values are in this direction and want to head that way, the entire conditioned patterns of your life are headed that way.
Right.
And they are not just going to change because you've had an epiphany. That momentum is there. Now, this is really important because, God, I hear it all the time. People get this question all the time. They have some enormous insight, aha moment, or they've been to a retreat and everything, it's like, the Red Sea is parting, right? Right. And then all of a sudden they're yelling at their kids or flipping somebody off on the highway, right? And they, oh God, this is terrible. I thought I was through this. I'm done. And recrimination and all this stuff starts beating themselves up. And you go, no. This is where the rubber meets the road. Mm-hmm. Yes. If you think that suddenly you're going to have the insight and it's going to be flowers and rainbows and dolphins from then on out, you're going to do nothing but create another opportunity for you to beat yourself up.
Mm-hmm. Well, right? It's interesting that you say that, because I actually want to step into that for just a minute. I just did a 3-day workshop, and one of the things that I talk to people about, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, because there's something about that and what I call re-entry back into reality after you've had that big epiphany or that big insight or that big space that says, I am wide open, I'm setting intention, I'm going to be different. And I've noticed that one of two things usually happens. It's kind of like when you put in the Jetta come into the street light, you haven't thought about a Jetta, but the minute you start thinking about a Jetta, you see a Jetta everywhere you go. It's kind of the same thing when you're doing the work on yourself, that when you re-enter back into that space of where your life is, it feels as if all of your triggers are being shot all at the same time, as if you're oversensitized to the fact that everyone's doing the things that like you were trying to work on. So it just annoys you so much that you feel need to lash out. So it's either that side of it, or you feel like nobody understands the epiphany and the insight you had. And so I'd love to hear your perspective. I know you're laughing right now, because I talk to people about really being mindful around the re-entry part of moving and shifting big energy for yourself, because you got to be careful that you're not going to throat punch somebody the minute you walk out of one of my events. Because your biggest trigger is going to come snapping. Right? I'm just curious, what are your thoughts?
That's
and
right.
How do you handle that?
I refer to that as the Great Retreat Crash.
Yes.
And everybody experiences. I like your reentry, your life reentry image is perfect as well. The key is that you have to understand, number one, it's going to happen, right? If it doesn't happen, you're not growing.
Right.
And the only way you're going to truly grow into the vision you received during a workshop or seminar is to confront these things. But until we recognize that they are programmed patterns deeply embedded in the nervous system and not a character flaw, you're going to realize immediately a gap opens up between you and the reaction, right? So now it's not me, it's a reaction that's going on. Now there's space, and I can go, oh, wait a minute. And what you put in that space is love, humor, compassion, and that's the beautiful thing, because when it begins to dawn on you that's what's happening in you, you realize it's happening in everybody. Everybody is acting robotically. Very few are truly awake to themselves to a level where they're literally taking back control. They're really reprogramming the nervous system to reorganize itself around your vision. I mean, we got to get this. It always starts with a vision, right? But then the vision's got to move south. It's got to get into the body. It's got to colonize the whole rest of the thing going on, down to every cell and every impulse and that's what took me 20 years to get. Yeah. The other part, the vision, that was a piece of cake. And I thought that was it. And I was singing it, and that's wham, wham.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up, right? Because they have this great vision, and they have these dreams and these whispers that come to them around opportunities and possibilities for them. You know, that big kind of, they start to imagine the possibilities. But what happens is, and I love the fact that you talk about reprogramming, and the fact that it needs to get into every cell of your body, because I'm curious, as you know, and thank you for saying it's been a 20-year journey. What do you do when you're someone who's wired like me, who is the most impatient person on the planet? And I will really throw down with anyone to say that is probably, I could probably win awards for my lack of patience. My dog came into my life for a reason, because he is absolutely, without a doubt, a test of my patience every day in every way. In a really good, powerful way. He's kind of a mini me in so many ways. But I'm curious, as you think about that programming and reprogramming, and what happens when you have that mighty vision, when you have that space that really starts to awaken you. Because to use your words, we're very robotic in that awakening. What do you do when you're not getting the traction you want yesterday, and you start to either lose the belief, lose the faith, lose the whatever? How do you stay grounded in that so that you can start to do the process of getting that integrated into all of your cells and into your body?
It comes with understanding. And the understanding deepens over time. And by understanding, it starts intellectually, it starts with thoughts, it starts with considering possibilities. And then little by little, it becomes more of a knowing, right? And an intuitive, instinctive knowing, because you're seeing it. Once you see it with your own eyes, you go, oh, that, and you can't be fooled anymore. Right? If it's just intellectual, you're going to be a little bit confused. But once you actually see these things functioning within you, you can't be fooled anymore. And at that point, the momentum is shifted. You are now on the side of your vision, and once that happens, the energy system has no choice but to eventually, it'll resist it first, but it eventually will reorganize around it, because it's taking its marching orders from you. One of the key things you can look at when you have, there's a character trait like, I want it done yesterday, I am impatient. Look at that very, very closely. That's learned behavior.
Yeah,
that is not who you are. There's no such thing as an impatient child. Babies are not impatient. They want what they want when they want it. right? They are clear about what they want, and then it's over. Or look at an animal. Cats are great little Zen masters. They live their life. They're totally, if something threatens them or something comes up, they're like totally in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right. And then the moment it's over, 2 minutes later, they're right. They completely release all that energy.
Mm-hmm.
You are imagining yourself, and everybody listening has this. We have a self-image. We think that self-image is real. We think that's who we really are. But your entire self-image was a product of the same programmed responses that were simply the defensive mechanism on when you were young. That's it. That's how the whole thing works. You're a little kid, you're acting normal, you're totally innocent, you're totally yourself, and it runs into the rules of the tribe. Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes really painfully, sometimes mildly, but nobody gets through childhood unscathed. Nobody gets through childhood with complete, oh, you're wonderful all the time. It just doesn't happen. But when you're a little kid, you can't suddenly you can't sit there and reason this out and go, well, okay, this is mom and dad's rules. I'm in their house. I got to do it this way, so I'll do it. And then when I get older, I'll be my true self again. I mean, it doesn't happen that way. Mommy, daddy, good. Me, bad. Right? So whatever behavior earns the distress, the nervous system decides is not safe. Now, this happens before you can talk, before you can think. This actually, there's evidence this happens in the womb. This is before the nervous system even develops. I mean, the level of energetic programming that takes place. And so it basically is sorting all this out to make sure you're safe and get what you want. And so the behaviors that aren't treated, that don't get you what you want, even if they're the very best part of you, are off in the basement. Over time, as we develop emotionally and energetically, and in a sense of self-image, our self-image is based on that tiny set of behaviors that was actually allowed. We think that's who we are. And it's not. It's never been who you are. It's who you were taught to be in order to serve a particular purpose. So you can reteach the nervous system to serve a very different purpose, and it will do it totally obediently and quickly, because it doesn't like being held in that position either. That was a necessity of defense. It was a necessity to survive. It was not a choice. Yeah, it's very powerful to grasp that your entire sense of identity is actually only a fraction of what you actually are.
And that's absolutely mind-blowing and powerful to think about. It's also quite beautiful when you start to release. And I'm curious because I can almost feel the energy of some of our listeners right now who are like, yeah, or they're doing the yeah, but, and the resistance is starting to show up. They're like, yeah, that all just sounds like a bunch of woo-woo, new age, fluffy stuff, which is always interesting to me as someone who is an engineer by background and really started to say it's universal energy and laws of physics. And it is what it is. And I'm curious as you sense people, as you're having this conversation and you start to engage in a discussion around redefining how you think about who you are. What happens when that resistance shows up? Because we have been taught certain patterns. We have been, for a lot of people, been playing in that very fearful, survival, protective, defensive mode for so long. We don't even know what it looks like on the other side.
I have no idea.
All you've done right now is just trigger the fact that they're like, this is exactly why. And then you can feel the shutdown. You can feel the resistance. You can feel the garage door just slam down. How do you address that? And what are some of the things, those that want to step forward? I just had a conversation with a client about, he's very academic and wanting to know that knowing in his intuition. And it scares him to death. Yeah. And so I think about what words, I won't even say advice or counsel, what words would you offer to someone who wants to take that leap, yet in every way they try, that resistance and that fear feels almost overwhelming at times?
Well, first off, come into a conversation like that with yourself, right? With no resistance to whatever they bring you, right? If you create that space of non-resistance, and it's felt. I mean, the resistance is part of the defense mechanism, right? It's, your energy system, your nervous system has created a sense of identity. It's created certain behaviors. It's created reactive patterns in order to keep you safe. It doesn't want that to change, because if it changes, it doesn't know if you can keep you safe anymore. So there's always going to be resistance, no matter what you attempt to do, whatever step you take in your life. Just get over it. There's going to be inner resistance to it, inner conflict, self-sabotage, all of those things we like to put names on. Here's what I do. The problem is that people feel the resistance and then they think they have to get rid of it. In inner reconciliation, which is the process I created, I do exactly the opposite. When something comes up that feels negative, it feels like it's in the way, it feels like it's a boat anchor, I turn all my attention on it. I start moving towards it, right? If you've got resistance about something in the nervous system, it's not a problem, it's part of the defense. And the first thing I do is open up to it. I just let it be there. And that's probably the most difficult thing for most people to do. I call it the yoga of allowing. You simply get into this posture of allowing things to be there, including the resistance, including the fact that you don't want it to be there. You just really stand back to this place where you feel totally. You let yourself feel. That's what mindfulness is. Everybody likes to picture meditation and mindfulness as it's all this blissful, right? And stuff. No, you're mindful of whatever is there. When you awake to what's ever there, not to not to this other altered state thing. That's a very different thing, right? So now, once you've done that, once you've allowed it to be there, you can actually engage with that energy. And the number one question I'll have people ask inside, not their heads, but actually the energy of resistance itself, or fear or self-doubt or whatever it is, I say, what are you protecting me from? And that completely shifts the conversation. It's no longer an enemy. It is an overzealous friend. And in that moment, you have created an inner space of inner compassion. You've actually stepped into, without knowing it, you stepped into self-acceptance. Because these are a part of you. You can't get rid of them. You can't get rid of it. This energy, what we call these negative emotions and things, you can't get rid of them, right? Because they're there for a reason, and they'll stay there. They are so committed to your well-being that they are on duty 24/7 from the moment the sperm met the egg, and they will stay on duty until the danger is past. There's only one way to break this spell, and that is to convince the energy itself that there is no more danger. I like to use the example of after World War II, years after World War II, there were still Japanese soldiers scattered over the South Pacific Islands that didn't know the war was over. I just recently read about one. He wrote a book. It was 1974 before he finally found out the war was over. He was on guard the entire time, but there was nothing to be on guard against. That's the way our nervous system works. And if we understand that, the enormous amount of love and compassion starts flowing towards ourselves and our own inner world. And that's where you begin to resolve inner conflict, which is why I call it inner reconciliation.
Wow, that is incredibly beautiful and so powerful. I love that framing of yoga, of allowing. It's interesting because, we talk about facing your fears and stepping into that space to have almost a conversation with it. And I think the question that you say, because I've used the analogy before trying to help people understand that, I said, think about a child throwing a temper tantrum. And I said, if you start yelling back, if you start forcing back, what's going to happen? It just exasperates the tantrum, versus one of the best ways to resolve that is say, I want to know what's wrong. but use your words. And so I love what you're saying, because it so fits in that space of how do you allow yourself to be that witness to say, what is the feeling I'm having right now? What's that emotion? Where's it coming from? And that question around, what are you protecting me from? I think is just so simple, yet so profound, because when you can sit at the table with your inner child that's freaking out about whatever and say, I want to hear what you have to say, use your words. What is it you're trying to, what are you afraid of? What is it you're trying to protect us from? You end up having this incredible level of self-compassion that I believe can do wonders to open up love, you as a conduit for love both ways. And so I love that framing of yoga of allowing. I think that's so powerful, because you can almost visualize that process. And so I'm curious, I mean, GP, as you're talking about this is, I mean, my gosh, we're going to dig. I want to like ask you a million questions about all these different things. And, you know, as you think about that space of being and that space of knowing and really getting, and I would imagine that the journey keeps continuing of you getting to know that intuitive space for yourself deeper and deeper every day, more and more every day. Not that you've fully arrived there, or maybe you have. What does that look like as you start to open up a broader space or a more purposeful space around possibilities that are out, you know, as you think about work you get to do or what's opening up? When you think about imagining those possibilities, what does that look like for you? What does that start to mean? What starts to show up?
Well, first off, there's no such thing as arrived. It is, you know, imagine a flower that never stops opening. You know, from perfection to perfection, from beauty to beauty. It's a continuously unfolding journey that is the strangest paradox, because it's absolutely perfect and complete in the moment, and it's going to be perfect and complete in the next moment, and it's not going to be the same. It's paradoxical. It's, you know, it's a total mystery, but hey, so is life. You know, why anything exists at all is pretty much a big mystery. So let's just kind of get that out of the way. When you talk about possibilities, when you talk about what might be, you know, if for me, because so much of this has been resolved within me, and the stuff that isn't, I'm just totally open now. I mean, it's just inside it feels, you know, childlike. You know, whatever comes up, and you know, some stuff has come up from, you know, distant past, and you know, because every experience you're in is going to trigger something, and you know, every experience you ever had, the nervous system put in place responses for that. You know, that's part of the deal. And in fact, I've gotten to the point where I invite it, because if I don't get triggered, it doesn't get healed. I'm not trying to avoid the triggers. I'm welcoming them. You know, that sense of allowing has expanded to, yeah, please, please. I want to grow. I want to develop. I want to see how far this goes. And then what happens, of course, is that naturally your attention turns outward. You can't help it. That love just overflows, and you just simply, when you see the level of suffering that people are going through, and you understand that it is self-imposed, self-sustained. It wasn't self-imposed. You know, you didn't do it to yourself. Right? You didn't make these choices. Nobody wakes up in the morning and go, gee, I wonder how I'm going to screw up my life today. Nobody does that, right? These are all patterns that got put there because they had to be there. But unwittingly, we are sustaining it because we're not questioning our assumptions. We just assume that who we think we are is actually who we are. We're not taking these things to task. So I just start looking at how to help individuals. How do I put these things in a form that is easy to grasp, you know, step by step. You can make something happen, and you can begin to let this thing unfold within you. And then I look beyond that as well. What do we do with the world? What do we do with the world that is acting like that spoiled brat, right? And by the world, I'm talking about human. The world isn't. The world's fine.
Right.
the world's fine. It's us, because when you are in the defensive posture and don't recognize it, you see threats everywhere. That inner conflict puts you in a position where you're defending, and even if you get far enough into it, you can become aggressive and violent. You can destroy things without, you can be unaware of the consequences of your actions. You can think that if it benefits me, it's good enough, and if nobody else is included, and that's the state the world is in. That's the nature of greed, that it cannot see the consequences of its own actions, and therefore it's cut off from the kind of compassion that would make us feel the pain we cause somebody else. And once we do that, we don't do it anymore, right? If you don't feel it, that won't happen. So the mission is I want a world of bodhisattvas, which are the committed, the utter commitment to the awakening of all humanity. Bodhisattvas are characters that don't even go into heaven or nirvana or anything. They just keep coming back because no, I'm not going unless everybody's come with me.
Nice.
I mean, it's a beautiful. They're the hero of Zen Buddhism, as opposed to the one who gets enlightened and walks on water and stuff like that. Well, Jesus was a bodhisattva, but that's that kind of character that is more than willing to sacrifice self-interest, so that, or better put, self-interest and universal interests are no longer two.
Wow. Talk about a really big imagine if. That's I want all of you listening right now for just a moment to dance in that space a little bit and imagine if you invited your triggers in, to really understand where they were coming from, to kind of have that conversation full on, to open up more access to love for yourself and others, to create that space that GP is talking about. I think about how delicious that is. I think about, embracing that huge imagine, the possibilities, and thinking about that could be. And the thing that I love most about what you said was every turn is another turn to be perfect and complete. And it's different. And it's another turn of perfect and complete. And it's different, and another turn. And so when you imagine as I welcome that in, as I welcome in those triggers, knowing it's perfect and complete for what it is to move me to my next, to open up, to have access to that love and that space where I can have a deeper awakening. Who doesn't want to play in that space?
Who doesn't want to be there?
I just think that's really...
that's not a hard sell.
I want to dance there all day long. There's people right now that I know are like, okay, I want to know how to dance there. So I think it's a perfect time for people to know how to connect with you, GP. How do they have this conversation with you? How do they step into a place to learn more about what they can truly access and how to do some of those steps to reprogram some of those protective measures they've put in place?
Wonderful. Well, the easiest place to find me is gpwalsh.com. I made it pretty simple. And right on the very first page, there'll be a link to a free video. It's about 20 minutes that explains inner reconciliation. Will actually take you through an exercise, and explains the whole process of how to really reframe or redefine your relationship with your own inner feelings, so they stop being an enemy that you have to get rid of, and they start being a part of you that needs to be embraced. And then it actually take them through an exercise to do that, which is a really easy way to get started to learn about the whole process. And then I've got just like courses and meditations. I've got stuff coming out. So many I've actually had to retire a bunch because I can't manage them all anymore. I have been doing this a long time.
And I will say, as someone who's listened to some of his meditations, the work that GP does is absolutely phenomenal. It's one of the reasons I've been so delighted and I'm honored to have him here. This is a man who's been doing incredible work in this space. And so, while we're having a fun conversation and getting into some things here, there's so much more to explore. And I encourage all of you to go out and see what he's doing, how you can get connected. Because I think as we dance in that space of imagine if, there's so much possibility available if we allow ourselves to open that up more. And everything that GP is doing is such amazing and powerful tools to give you what you need to do that. And so I definitely would love to have you back, GP. I want to have more conversations. This is a space that lights me up on every level. But I'm curious, as we're kind of closing things out and bringing this to a point where we can move to the next, what would you say, what would be your words of wisdom as we're bringing this full circle for our audience as they're listening to this discussion today?
You're not broken. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. You think there is only because you don't understand how your own body and mind and heart actually function. Once you do, you realize you're not broken and you never were. And it is such an enormous relief. You have been found innocent of all, you've been vindicated of all wrongdoing. I mean, it ends, the shame, the guilt, all of the recrimination. It ends in this beautiful flowering of understanding that literally sinks in, colonizes the entire body, and changes the entire universe from the inside out effortlessly. You barely have to do anything, because what you discover is the energy of your own nature is already that powerful and already that dialed in and already that connected. What we're doing is we're not making you better. We're removing everything that's been hiding you. And you find underneath, it's like, I love to call it original innocence. You just find that really pureness that is the child and the wisdom of the sage in the same place.
Wow, talk about delicious on top of delicious. That was, did anyone else feel that in your body when GP said, you're not broken? The way he said that, did you feel, I guess I just had a moment when you said that. I could feel it take over my whole body in this really calm, peaceful, energetic way. And so I hope some of you that are listening had that same experience, because that was one of the most beautiful things I've felt in a while. And so truly thank you for the gift that you are. Thank you for taking time and sharing a little bit of your light, some of your wisdom, and just how you choose to show up in this world. GP, it has been an absolute honor having you as a guest on this show. I am just overflowing with love for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Candy. It's just an honor, and I just love being in your presence.
And that goes both ways. And so for all of you listening, I hope you will stand in a place to know how powerful you are and know that you are not broken, and take that choice to invite whatever it is that's scaring you and holding you back into a conversation so that you can step into your most magnificent light. Just know that leadership is all about how you choose to show up. It's how you choose to serve others and how you choose to take that responsibility. And it starts with you saying yes to yourself. So again, deeply appreciate all of you joining us today. Deeply appreciate my guest on so many levels. Just incredible love for this man. For GP Walsh, for sharing his time and his thoughts with us. Make sure you subscribe. Would love to see you on the next show. But for now, go out, set your intention, create the influence and impact that you so desire, and go set this world on fire. So with that, I'll catch up with you soon. Bye, everyone.